Hello and welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have you join us today on this very special episode of our podcast. We hope you're all doing great, whether you're listening while commuting, relaxing at home, or maybe even at school. Wherever you are, we are so glad you're here with us. I'm Agnes, and I'll be your host for today, and I'm thrilled to dive into today's topic with you all. And of course, I'm not alone. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Jasper.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here with you today. I'm Jasper, and I can't wait to chat about the topic we've got for you. We're really excited, and I hope you are too. But before we get started, Agnes, what are we going to talk about today?
I'm glad you asked, Jasper. Today's topic is something truly fascinating. We're going to explore a subject that's close to the hearts of many readers, writers, and anyone who loves the power of words. We're talking about the New Yorker poetry. Now I know, that might sound a little mysterious, right? But trust me, by the end of this episode, you're going to love it.
Yes, exactly. The New Yorker is a famous magazine, and it's known for so many things, from news and culture to great writing. But did you know that it also has a beautiful poetry section? The poems you find in the New Yorker are not just words on a page. They're tiny windows into different lives, experiences, and emotions. And why is this so important for people learning English, you ask? Well, poetry helps us connect to language in a very unique way. It's not just about learning grammar or vocabulary. It's about feeling the rhythm of English, understanding the music of the language, and even seeing the world through different eyes. And that's something really special.
Exactly. And the poetry you find in the New Yorker can actually teach us a lot. For people learning English at the elementary or intermediate level, this is the perfect way to really dive into the heart of the language. It's beautiful, it's emotional, and it's a great way to grow your vocabulary in a very natural and fun way. The poems are sometimes short, and even though they can be deep, they don't need to be difficult to understand.
I couldn't agree more. One of the best things about poetry in the New Yorker is the way it makes you think. The poems don't always tell you everything. Sometimes, they leave a little bit of mystery. They make you stop and think, what does this really mean? And that's so powerful for people learning English, because it challenges you to use your imagination. You start to think about words in a new way. You start to feel more connected to the language, and that helps you improve your skills much faster. And it's not just about the words, it's about the feelings, the sounds, and the images that come to life when you read a poem. That's why we're so excited to talk about this today.
Yes, and I also want to say a huge thank you to all of you who are listening to this podcast. We know that learning a new language can be challenging, but you're doing amazing. Whether you're just starting to learn English or you're improving your skills, keep going. It's people like you who make this journey so rewarding. So, thank you for joining us today, and we really hope you'll get inspired by this topic. Now, before we go further, let's talk about why we chose this subject. We could have picked many things to discuss, but the New Yorker, poetry has a special place for anyone who loves literature, language, or just the beauty of words. It's the kind of subject that pulls you in, and once you're there, you can't help but appreciate how powerful language can be.
That's right. And let's not forget that the New Yorker has been a part of the literary world for so long. It's known for discovering new voices and sharing them with readers. That's why if you're interested in improving your English and reading great poetry, the New Yorker is a fantastic resource. You get to discover not only the beauty of language but also hear different perspectives from people all over the world. So, whether you're reading a poem about love, loss, or life in a big city, you're getting a slice of a bigger picture, a picture that will help you grow as an English learner. And today, we're going to help you understand how to make the most of it.
Exactly. And even though we're talking about the New Yorker, remember this. Poetry is a tool that can work for any kind of English learner. Whether you're just starting out or you're already at an intermediate level, poetry will help you understand the nuances of the language. You'll be able to pick up new vocabulary, expressions, and even hear how native speakers really use the language in a poetic way. It's like opening a new door to understanding the language, and we're going to guide you through it today.
We're so excited to have you with us as we talk about the New Yorker, poetry. Whether you've read a lot of poetry before or this is your first time exploring it, we promise this will be an interesting journey. So, let's dive in and see how poetry can help you improve your English while connecting with beautiful words and ideas.
Alright, So let's dive right into it. Jasper mentioned how the New Yorker poetry helps us hear different perspectives from people all over the world. And that's one of the things that makes reading poetry such an exciting experience. When you open a poem in the New Yorker, it's like you're stepping into the mind of the writer, and you're experiencing the world through their eyes. Each poem gives us a glimpse of something personal, whether it's an emotion, an experience, or a moment in time. This is where it gets really interesting for learners of English because poetry can teach us things that are sometimes hidden in everyday language. Now, you might be thinking, but Agnes, isn't poetry hard to understand? And I get it. Sometimes poems can feel a little tricky because they don't always follow the same structure as regular stories. Poems can feel a little tricky because they don't always follow the same structure as regular stories. But here's the thing. Poetry is meant to make us feel something. It's not always about understanding every single word perfectly. Sometimes it's about getting the general feeling of the poem, even if you don't know exactly what each word means. And that's one of the reasons why poetry can be so powerful for language learners. It helps you learn in a more intuitive way.
Right, and sometimes the beauty of a poem lies in the sound of the words, not just their meaning. In The New Yorker, many poems have a musical quality to them. When you read them out loud, you can hear the rhythm and flow of the language. This is an important skill for anyone learning English. It's about improving your pronunciation, your understanding of intonation, and your ability to understand how English sounds. So, if you're reading a poem and it feels like the words are dancing off the page, that's not by accident. Poets carefully choose words that not only make sense but also sound beautiful when spoken aloud. Agnes, do you have an example of a poem that you've read from The New Yorker that really captured your attention because of its sound or rhythm?
Oh, I love this question, Jasper. Actually, I remember reading a poem called A Dream of My Father in the New Yorker that really stuck with me. It was about the relationship between a father and his child, but what made it so special wasn't just the subject matter, it was the way the poet used language. The words almost sang as you read them. You could feel the rhythm, the pauses, and the way each line flowed into the next. There was one line that went something like, "His hands were rough, but they held me gently." The repetition of sounds there, especially the H sound in hands and held, made it feel like the poem was breathing with you, almost like the father was right there, speaking to you. That's something I really love about poetry in The New Yorker. It's not just about understanding the words, it's about experiencing the sound and emotion behind them. And when you're learning English, you can use poems like this to really tune your ear to the natural flow of the language. It helps with pronunciation and understanding how English speakers naturally connect words together.
Exactly, and what's amazing is that poems in The New Yorker cover so many different themes. So, whether you're reading about nature, family, love, or even the struggles of modern life, you're always learning something new about the language and the world. And if you're someone who's learning English, that variety is super important because it exposes you to different kinds of vocabulary and expressions that you might not use in everyday conversations. Think about it. When you read a poem about nature, you might pick up words like breeze, whisper, rustle, or mountain. These words can help you talk about the world around you in more detailed ways. If you read a poem about a city, you might learn words like graffiti, subway, skyscraper, or corner cafe. So, poetry really helps expand your vocabulary in a fun and interesting way.
Exactly. And there's another thing about poetry that I think is really important for English learners. Sometimes the language in a poem doesn't follow all the usual rules you might find in textbooks. Poets love to play with language. They might change the order of words, use metaphors, or even leave out parts of a sentence to create a certain effect. This is called poetic license. It means that the poet can break the rules of grammar or structure to express themselves in a way that feels more emotional or meaningful. For example, in everyday English, we might say, "I was really tired, so I went to bed early." But a poet might say, "Tired, I fell into the night's embrace." It's the same idea, but the poet makes the language sound much more beautiful and mysterious. As a learner, understanding how poets play with language can help you be more creative with your own use of English. It can inspire you to think outside the box, to use language in new ways, and to play with words in your own writing or speaking.
I love how you explained that, Agnes. It's so true. And don't worry if you don't understand every single line of a poem right away. Even native speakers sometimes need to read a poem several times to fully understand it. What matters is that you're trying, and that's what's going to make you a better English learner. When you read a poem in the New Yorker, you're not just learning vocabulary, you're learning how to think in English, how to feel in English. You're building a connection to the language that goes deeper than just translating words from one language to another. And, remember, you don't need to be an expert in English to enjoy poetry. Even if you're still at the elementary or intermediate level, you can still enjoy the rhythm, the sounds, and the emotional power of poems. Plus, when you keep practicing by reading poems, you'll notice how your English improves in ways you didn't expect.
Exactly. And we want to encourage you all to keep reading. Pick up a poem from the New Yorker or any other source and read it out loud. Try to feel the rhythm of the language. Notice how the words make you feel and think. Whether you're reading for fun or to improve your English, poetry is a tool that will help you grow in your language skills. So, I really hope this conversation has inspired you to give poetry a try. Don't be afraid to dive into the New Yorker or any other poetry collection. Remember, each poem you read brings you one step closer to mastering English in a way that feels natural and alive. You're not just learning a language, you're connecting with the heart of the language. And that's something truly special. Absolutely, Jasper. I love everything you just said. You've really touched on the heart of what makes poetry such an incredible tool for English learners. The emotional connection that you can build with the language through poetry is something you can't find in a grammar book. And as you said, it doesn't matter if you don't understand everything the first time you read a poem. Thing is that you're engaging with it, that you're paying attention to how the language feels. Over time, you'll start picking up more and more, and it will feel like second nature. Now, we've talked about the beauty of language and how poetry helps you tune into the rhythm and flow of English. But there's something else that makes the New Yorker poetry especially useful for learners, and that's the diversity of voices you'll find in the poems. The poets featured in the New Yorker come from all different backgrounds and cultures. Some write about life in big cities, others about quiet moments in nature. Some share experiences of personal struggles, while others explore joy and celebration. By reading poetry from such a wide range of voices, you're not just learning the language, you're learning about the world. You're seeing different perspectives, and you're understanding how people use English in different contexts.
That's such a great point, Agnes. It's one of the things I love about the New Yorker poetry section, too. It gives you a glimpse of how language can change based on the poet's background, their experiences, and even where they come from. You'll read poems that explore the bustling energy of a city, while others will take you to a calm forest or an empty street. You'll learn slang or more formal expressions, but you'll also hear the creative ways people express themselves through the language. This is particularly helpful for English learners because it exposes you to how diverse and rich the language can be. If you only learn standard English from textbooks, it might be harder to understand different accents, dialects, or informal expressions that are commonly used in everyday speech. By reading poetry, especially poems from different parts of the world, you can get a taste of how flexible and adaptable the English language is. And let's not forget, as learners, we can take a lesson from how poets use English creatively. I know that sometimes, when you're learning a new language, it feels like there's only one right way to speak. But poetry shows us that there's beauty in breaking the rules, in bending language to fit your personal style, in experimenting with words and sounds. And that's so freeing for learners.
Yes, exactly, Jasper. And the great thing is that reading poetry doesn't need to be a lonely experience. You can enjoy it by yourself, of course, but it's also a wonderful topic to discuss with friends or classmates. Imagine sitting down with a group and reading a poem from the New Yorker together, discussing what it means to each person, what emotions it brings up, and how the language makes you feel. When you engage with poetry like that, you're not only improving your language skills, but you're also learning how to express your thoughts in English. You get to practice speaking and writing, and you can really explore the language in a way that's both fun and deep. In fact, I highly recommend that as you read poetry, you take notes. If there's a phrase or a word that stands out to you, write it down. Look up the meaning, use it in a sentence, and try to use it in your own conversations. This way, you're actively expanding your vocabulary while also learning how to use language in new ways. And trust me, this is an incredibly powerful tool when it comes to language learning.
I love that idea of taking notes, Agnes. It's such a simple yet effective strategy. And to add on to that, don't be afraid to make mistakes. I know that sometimes we worrying about making mistakes when learning a new language, but poetry teaches us that there is no perfect way to speak or write. What's important is the expression of thought. When you read a poem, you might see strange word choices or even unusual grammar, but that's okay. It shows us that language is an evolving thing, and the rules are meant to be played with. I think that's something that makes poetry especially exciting. It's free, it lets you experiment, it doesn't judge you. And that's exactly what you need when learning a new language, the space to try new things, to take risks, and to find your own voice in the language.
Yes, poetry is a perfect example of how language is more than just a tool for communication, it's a tool for self-expression. And that's one of the most important lessons you can learn when you're studying English. Language isn't just about getting the right answers on a test or memorizing grammar rules. It's about being able to express yourself, to share your thoughts and feelings with others, and to understand the world around you. Poetry does that in a way that's both beautiful and meaningful. Let's also talk about how reading poetry from the New Yorker can spark your creativity. After reading a few poems, you might start writing your own. Don't be surprised if you find yourself inspired to write a poem about something that's important to you. Maybe it's something personal, like a memory or a dream, or maybe it's about something you see in the world every day. Writing poetry is another fantastic way to practice English. It allows you to use the language in a creative and expressive way, helping you not only improve your writing skills but also expand your imagination and your ability to think in English.
I love that, and the idea of writing your own poems is actually a great way to take your English to the next level. When you write poetry, you're forced to think about the words you choose carefully, to consider how they sound and how they fit together. You're really playing with the language. And what's great is that you don't have to worry about making it perfect. Poetry is all about feeling, expression, and emotion. It's the one place in language where it's okay to bend the rules and have fun with words. Plus, you can always come back and revise your poems, just like poets do when they create their work.
Exactly, Jasper. And don't forget, poetry helps you connect to the culture around you too. Whether you're reading about everyday life in the United States or about the history and traditions of another culture, poetry can give you an intimate look into the values, struggles, and joys of different people. Through poems, you can experience the world through someone else's eyes, and that's an incredibly valuable way to learn a language and appreciate its many nuances. And the best part? The more you read and write poetry, the more you'll find that language learning becomes a truly personal journey. You'll have your own style, your own voice, and your own connection to English. And that's what makes learning a language so rewarding, it becomes yours. So, grab a poem from the New Yorker, start reading, start writing, and watch how your English skills soar.